I was standing in the cereal aisle at a Kroger with my 13-year-old daughter when the president of Cedar Crown Preserve told a sheriff I was outside her house threatening to kill her. She gave him an exact time, 5022 on a Thursday afternoon, and described my clothes, my posture, even the way I supposedly clenched my fists like a soldier preparing to attack. The problem was, Kroger had 26 security cameras. I had a receipt stamped 5019, and my daughter had spent those 3 minutes trying to convince me that chocolate cereal counted as a healthy dinner. My name is Mason Hale, and I just returned from 14 months in Bahrain with the Army Corps of Engineers. I expected to come home tired, maybe a little disconnected, maybe awkward around my own kid for a while. What I did not expect was to discover that a developer had built 12 luxury homes on land my family had owned since 1951, then created an HOA and tried to fine me for living there. My grandfather, Silas Hale, bought 226 acres in Rabon County, Georgia after coming home from Korea. He paid $1,800 for it, which sounds like pocket change now, but back then it was every dollar he had and then some. He built the farmhouse near a spring-fed creek, cutting each beam himself from pine and chestnut. And he planted a row of peach trees along the eastern meadow because my grandmother said every home needed something beautiful that did not serve a practical purpose. My father grew up there. I grew up there. And my daughter, Ellie, learned to ride a bicycle down the same dirt lane where I had once split my chin trying to jump a drainage ditch. My wife, Rachel, loved that place before she loved me. Or at least that was the joke between us. We met at a county fair when I was 24. She beat me at a ring toss, won a stuffed bear, then made me carry it for the rest of the night. We married beneath the largest peach tree in the orchard, and for 11 years, she turned that old farmhouse into the kind of place people remembered by smell. Cinnamon in winter, tomato vines in summer, coffee before sunrise. Rachel died from an aneurysm on an ordinary Monday morning. No warning, no long goodbye. Just one moment she was pouring coffee and the next moment the world had divided itself into before and after. Ellie was 10. I was 37 and suddenly understood that silence could be loud enough to hurt. After Rachel was gone, the land became more than property. It was the last place where our life still felt intact. Their gardening gloves stayed on a hook in the mudroom. Her initials were carved onto the porch rail where nobody could see them unless they knew to look. Sometimes I sat beside the creek after dark and listened to the water move over the stones, because Rachel used to say running water carried grief somewhere else. Then my deployment orders came. 14 months in Bahrain, supporting construction and infrastructure projects. My older brother, Dean, agreed to take Ellie while I was gone. I gave him limited power of attorney for medical emergencies and school decisions, but nothing involving the land. Before leaving, I walked the property line one last time, checked the barn roof, locked the equipment shed, and stood beneath the peach trees until the light disappeared. When I came home, the peach trees were gone. I drove through the mountains late on a cold November afternoon, tired enough that I almost missed the turn. The old gravel road had been widened and paved. Decorative stone columns stood where my grandfather's wooden gate used to be, and between them hung black iron letters that read Cedar Crown Preserve, Private Residential Community. Beyond the gate sat 12 enormous houses with stone facades, 3-car garages, manicured lawns, and outdoor kitchens that probably cost more than my farmhouse. They covered the eastern meadow from the creek to the ridge. I stopped my truck in the road and stared at them, trying to make my brain understand what my eyes were seeing. A woman in a cream-colored Range Rover pulled across the entrance and blocked me. She stepped out wearing white slacks, a blue blazer, oversized sunglasses, and the expression of someone who had never heard the word no used in her direction. She tapped on my window with a pen. "Deliveries use the service entrance," she said. "This is not a through road." I rolled the window down. "I am not making a delivery." She glanced at my uniform, then at the duffel bags behind me. "Then you need a resident escort." I looked past her at a limestone house sitting directly where my grandfather's tool shed used to be. "Lady, I am the resident." She laughed, not loudly, just enough to make sure I heard the disrespect. "I am Vanessa Vale, president of the Cedar Crown Homeowners Association. I know every homeowner here. Then today is educational," I said. "My name is Mason Hale, and every house behind you is sitting on my family's land." Her smile vanished for half a second, then returned tighter than before. "That is impossible." "You should hope so." I drove around her Range Rover, crossed the new pavement, and found the old farmhouse trapped behind the development like a cabin somebody had forgotten to demolish. The house still stood, but runoff from the construction had turned the creek brown. A retaining ditch cut across part of the orchard. My barn was surrounded by fresh sod, and one of the new houses had a stone patio less than 50 yards from Rachel's garden. The next morning, Vanessa taped 5 violation notices to my front door. My truck was too large. My barn was an unapproved accessory structure. My split-rail fence violated community design standards. My porch needed repainting in an approved neutral color. My hound dog, Boone, had been seen without a leash. I read every page twice, then photographed them and placed them in a folder. I did not call her. I did not attend the HOA meeting. I did not give her the argument she clearly wanted. 2 days later, Vanessa returned with a membership packet and a bill for $4,800 in annual assessments. Your parcel falls within the recorded community boundaries, she said. Membership is mandatory. My house was built before your community existed. That does not exempt you. It usually exempts me from pretending you own it. Her face hardened. You military men come home thinking rules do not apply to you. That sentence stayed with me, not because it hurt, but because it told me exactly who she was. Vanessa did not believe rules were real. She believed rules were tools, and whoever held the clipboard got to decide where they pointed. That night, I downloaded the Cedar Crown plat from the county website. The boundary had been drawn around my farmhouse and across 41 acres of my eastern meadow. The developer was Vanessa's husband, Conrad Vale. He had used my acreage to satisfy the county's density requirement, then divided it into 12 home sites while I was overseas. The following week, Conrad came to my porch with a lawyer and offered me an envelope. Inside was a letter claiming my farmhouse encroached on Cedar Crown property and ordering me to vacate within 30 days. I looked at Conrad, then at the houses behind him. You built a neighborhood on my land, and now you're evicting me from it. He smiled. Property lines can be complicated, not when they were marked in concrete 70 years ago. I hired an independent surveyor named Amos Red, a 74-year-old man who spoke slowly, measured twice, and distrusted anyone who wore polished shoes to a job site. We found all 4 original corner markers, each stamped with my grandfather's initials. After 3 days of work, Amos spread his map across my truck hood and tapped the eastern boundary. They moved your line 387 feet, he said. 41 acres are missing. I stared at the rooftops. How many houses? Amos folded his glasses and looked at me. All 12. That was the moment my anger changed. Until then, it had been grief, confusion, heat behind the eyes. After that, it became direction. Vanessa must have sensed it, because the HOA called an emergency vote and approved a 7-foot privacy wall around my farmhouse to protect community appearance. Contractors arrived before sunrise. By the second day, the wall blocked my driveway and cut off the only direct route to the county road. Ellie stood beside me on the porch, watching concrete blocks rise between us and the outside world. Dad, she whispered. Can they really do this? I looked at Vanessa across the yard, standing beside the excavator with her clipboard tucked under one arm, smiling like she had finally put us in our place. No, I said quietly, but I am going to let her believe she can. For the next 6 days, Ellie and I drove out through an old logging trail behind the North Ridge, a route my grandfather used to haul timber before the county road was built. It added 37 minutes each way. Assuming the rain had not turned the red clay into something with the consistency of cake frosting. On the second morning, my truck slid sideways toward a ditch. Ellie grabbed the dashboard. Boone fell off the back seat, and the 3 of us sat there for a second in complete silence before she looked at me and said, I guess Cedar Crown does not offer complimentary towing. I laughed harder than the joke deserved, mostly because I had not laughed much since coming home, and sometimes your body takes whatever exit it can find. But by the end of that week, the detour was not funny anymore. Ellie was waking before sunrise to get to school on time, eating breakfast in the truck, finishing homework under the dome light, and asking questions no 13-year-old should have to ask, like whether an ambulance could reach us if I got hurt. I called the county sheriff, Raymond Pike, and asked him to inspect the wall. He arrived around noon, walked the length of it with his hands resting on his belt, then stared at the section blocking my driveway as though it had personally offended him but not quite enough to require paperwork. This looks like a property dispute, he said. They blocked emergency access to a home with a child inside. He sighed. I understand your concern. That is a sentence people use when they plan to do nothing. His jaw tightened, but he did not disagree. He told me it was a civil matter, advised me not to damage the wall, then drove away through the gate Vanessa had ordered installed on my land. I stood there watching his cruiser disappear between the stone columns and realized something important. I was not going to be rescued by anyone wearing a badge, holding a clipboard, or sitting behind a county desk. If I wanted the truth exposed, I had to build the case myself. So I photographed everything. Every concrete block, every trench, every contractor, every tire track. Every morning, Ellie climbed into my truck before daylight. I saved fuel receipts, mileage logs, school tardy notices, and videos of Vanessa directing the construction crew. Then I installed cameras around the farmhouse, 2 facing the driveway, 1 on the barn, 1 on the creek, and another hidden beneath the porch roof. They were hardwired, motion activated, and backed up to a cloud account. Vanessa could not erase by cutting a cable. Ellie helped me run the wiring. She held the ladder and passed me tools while Boone followed us around with a zip tie stuck to his tail. That night, after she went to bed, I spread everything across the kitchen table. The original deed, Amos Red's survey, HOA fines, photographs of the wall, Conrad's eviction letter, and the county plat. Rachel's old coffee mug sat beside me with 3 pens in it, exactly where I had left it before deployment. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the faded blue flower on the side, and for a moment the anger drained out of me. I missed her so badly that it felt physical. She would have known what to say to Ellie. She would have made the logging road into an adventure, packed sandwiches, named every pothole, found some way to make our daughter feel safe. I could build bridges in the desert, calculate load paths, organize men under pressure, but I could not figure out how to replace a mother, and that failure sat heavier on me than the wall outside. The next morning, I drove to the Rabun County Records office. A clerk named Marlene Vos helped me pull every document connected to Cedar Crown Preserve. She was in her 60s, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and had the quiet curiosity of someone who had spent 30 years watching people lie in official forms. Every building permit referenced the same survey, number RC24611, prepared by a surveyor named Victor Dane. I placed it beside my grandfather's deed and Amos's independent survey. The eastern boundary on Victor's map had shifted 387 feet west, removing 41 acres from my parcel and adding them to Conrad's development. It was too clean to be an accident. Survey mistakes wander. This line marched in a straight direction and stopped exactly where Conrad needed it to stop. I asked Marlene for every survey Victor Dane had filed in the previous 6 years involving Vail Residential Partners. She returned with 9 folders. In 7 of them, neighboring landowners had lost acreage, sometimes 2 acres, sometimes 6, once nearly 20, always in Conrad's favor, always near enough to an older absentee owner that nobody noticed right away. I sat there turning pages while the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the case stopped looking like one greedy developer making one bad decision. It looked like a business model. Then Marlene found something stranger. Cedar Crown had no title insurance policy attached to the development file, a project with 12 luxury homes, millions in financing, and not one policy protecting ownership of the land. That is unusual, right? I asked. She looked over her glasses. Honey, that is unusual, like a bank vault with no lock. Conrad had avoided title insurance because a title search would have uncovered my deed. He knew exactly who owned the land. He knew I was deployed, knew my brother lacked authority to sell, and built anyway because speed was part of the plan. Once families moved in and mortgages were issued, he figured the mess would become too expensive and too painful for anyone to unwind. He was betting I would accept a settlement rather than threaten 12 families with losing their homes. The clever part was that he was almost right. I did not want those families hurt. They had been lied to just like I had. But protecting them did not mean protecting Conrad. From the parking lot, I called the legal assistance office at Fort Stewart and explained the timeline. The captain on the other end asked several questions. When my orders began, when construction started, whether I had received notice, whether any court had approved action against my property. When I answered no to the last 3, his voice changed. Sergeant Hale, this may implicate the Service Embers Civil Relief Act. I knew the law generally, debt protections, foreclosure delays, court stays, but I'd never imagined it applied to someone physically building a subdivision on my land. He explained that taking material legal or property action against a deployed service member without proper notice and judicial approval could trigger federal scrutiny, especially if the developer intentionally exploited military absence. This is bigger than an HOA dispute, he said. Do not contact the developer alone again. Find counsel, preserve everything, and send us copies. Bigger than an HOA dispute. I sat in the truck with the phone in my hand, watching clouds gather over the ridge. Conrad thought he had targeted a tired widower with an old farmhouse and a military paycheck. What he had actually targeted was a deployed service member, protected by federal law, and he had left a paper trail wide enough to drive one of his luxury SUVs through. Pastor Gideon Shaw connected me with a real estate attorney named Nora Keene. Nora worked from a brick office above a hardware store in Clayton, wore cowboy boots beneath tailored suits, and kept a framed photograph of herself in navy dress whites behind her desk. She listened for nearly an hour without interrupting, then spread the documents into 3 neat rows. Original title, Fraudulent Survey, Construction During Deployment, she said. Conrad Vail did not cut a corner. He paved the highway through the law. She proposed 3 moves. First, a quiet title action asking Superior Court to declare me the legal owner of the 41 acres. That filing would require notification to every homeowner whose house sat on the disputed land, which meant Conrad could no longer keep them ignorant. Second, a formal referral to federal authorities regarding the military protections he may have violated. Third, we would investigate Victor Dane and every county official who approved permits based on his survey. And Vanessa? I asked. Nora glanced at the stack of violation notices. Vanessa is useful. That is not the word I would choose. She is emotional, arrogant, and convinced she is untouchable. People like that produce evidence faster than we can request it. Nora and I went door to door through Cedar Crown the following Saturday. I expected hostility. Instead, I found fear. A young couple named Patrick and Lena had a 6-month-old baby and had spent their entire savings on their down payment. A retired school principal named Ruth Calder started crying before I finished explaining. One man accused me of trying to steal his house, until Nora placed copies of the deed and both surveys on his kitchen counter. Then there was Harold Finch, a retired civil engineer who studied the maps for 10 minutes, opened the county GIS data on his tablet, and whispered, "Good Lord, he really moved the boundary." I told every family the same thing. I am not here to throw you out. I am here because the man who sold you these homes stole the ground under them. I want the truth established. Then I want a solution that does not punish innocent people. That promise changed everything. By sunset, 6 homeowners had called their own attorneys, 4 had demanded answers from Conrad, and Harold had agreed to help us review the development records. Vanessa responded the way people like Vanessa always respond when facts begin slipping beyond their control. She scheduled an emergency HOA meeting and titled it Community Security Response. Harold attended and recorded the audio legally from his seat. Vanessa described me as unstable, combat-trained, obsessed with property, and potentially dangerous. She proposed hiring armed private security to patrol my farmhouse and requested authority to impose daily fines until I surrendered access to the disputed acreage. Then Harold stood up and asked a simple question. "Have you seen Mr. Hale's deed?" Vanessa said the deed was irrelevant. "Have you seen the independent survey?" She said it was fraudulent. "Do you have evidence of that?" Vanessa's voice sharpened. "I do not need to justify board decisions to someone who lacks complete information." Harold laughed once. "That is convenient, because complete information appears to be what your husband is running from." 3 board members walked out. 2 more refused to vote. Vanessa ended the meeting early, furious and humiliated. And the next morning I found 7 new violation notices on my door. Nora filed the quiet title petition that afternoon. Conrad received notice on Tuesday. His attorney withdrew on Friday. Apparently the man reviewed the military orders, the survey history, and the missing title insurance, then decided continued representation was a threat to his own blood pressure. Conrad came to my house alone the next day in a rented black sedan. He stood outside the unfinished gap in the wall, because even his wife's contractors had been forced to leave a narrow opening after the fire marshal finally objected. "Name your price," he said. "For what?" "The 41 acres. I will buy them today. You already built on them. Then let us formalize it." I looked at him for a long moment. "You mean let us clean up what you did before a judge sees it?" His face tightened. "You are not a wealthy man, Mason. Litigation can last years. Experts cost money. Appeals cost money. I can make this painful. You already did. I can make it worse. I stepped closer, not threatening, just close enough that he had to look me in the eye. Conrad, you built 12 houses on the land where my wife and I got married while I was overseas serving this country. You walled my daughter inside her own home. And now you are standing here explaining pain to me, like you invented it. Go hire a criminal defense lawyer. He left without another word. 3 days later, Marlene called Nora from the county records office. Conrad had just tried to file a backdated deed claiming I sold him the 41 acres for $400,000 2 months before my deployment. The document carried my name, my supposed signature, and the seal of a notary who had died the previous year. Marlene compared the signature to my military power of attorney and immediately flagged it. Security cameras showed Conrad personally handing the forged deed across the counter. Nora called me at 11:18 that morning. Her voice was almost cheerful. Your developer just committed a felony on camera. I leaned back in my kitchen chair and stared through the window at Vanessa's wall. For the first time, the concrete did not look permanent. It looked like evidence waiting to be knocked down. Then my phone rang again, this time from Sheriff Pike. Vanessa Vale had filed a police report claiming I had threatened her in front of her home at 5:22 the previous afternoon. I looked across the table at Ellie's crumpled grocery receipt, then at the camera monitor showing my empty driveway from that exact hour, and I realized Nora had been right. Vanessa was about to produce more evidence than we ever could have requested. Sheriff Pike arrived the next morning looking like a man who had already decided he did not enjoy this conversation. He stood on my porch with Vanessa's statement folded in one hand and asked where I'd been at 5:22 the previous afternoon. I turned my laptop toward him and pulled up the camera feed. My driveway was empty. My truck was gone, and the timestamp sat in the corner of the screen as clear as daylight. Then Ellie brought me the grocery receipt from Kroger, stamped 5019, and I showed him a photograph she had taken in the cereal aisle 3 minutes later because she wanted proof that I had rejected chocolate marshmallow crunch on what she called unreasonable nutritional grounds. Pike stared at the receipt, the photograph, and the video, then rubbed his jaw. She gave a sworn statement, he said. And she lied in it, I answered. Kroger confirmed everything before noon. Their cameras showed Ellie and me arguing over cereal while Vanessa claimed I was standing in her driveway making threats. Pike reopened the report, this time with Vanessa listed as the subject instead of the victim, and something in his manner changed. Maybe he finally understood this was not a neighborhood disagreement. Maybe he realized that calling injustice a civil matter does not make it harmless. Nora added the false report to our growing stack of evidence, then advised me to do absolutely nothing dramatic. That was difficult advice to follow because Conrad immediately tried something dramatic enough for both of us. He hired a consultant from Atlanta named Randall Pierce, who submitted a report claiming my farmhouse was structurally unsafe and presented an immediate danger to surrounding residents. Her report recommended emergency condemnation and demolition, which was impressive considering Randall Pierce had never entered the house, inspected the foundation, or spoken to me. Conrad's plan was obvious. If he could not erase my deed, he would erase the building that made the land personal. He assumed grief was the only thing keeping me there. And maybe, if Rachel's porch, Rachel's kitchen, and Rachel's initials beneath the railing disappeared, I would finally sell. What he did not know was that the county building inspector, Lyle Mercer, disliked outside consultants almost as much as he disliked men who used the word emergency to skip proper procedure. Lyle inspected every beam, joist, footing, and support beneath the house. He spent nearly 2 hours in the crawl space, came out covered in dust, and said, "This place is built better than those 12 monuments to mortgage debt behind it." He marked the complaint unfounded and sent the county a written statement questioning the consultant's professional conduct. Conrad had tried to turn my home into rubble, and instead he gave us another witness. By then, the story had reached the Robin Mountain Ledger. A reporter named Camille Brooks came to the farmhouse with a recorder, a camera, and the kind of patience that makes dishonest people nervous. I showed her the wall, the deed, both surveys, the forged transfer, the HOA fines, and Vanessa's false police report. I told her about Rachel, the peach trees, and the morning Ellie asked whether an ambulance could reach us. Camille stopped writing for a moment and looked toward the concrete wall. "When does the court rule?" she asked. "Thursday," Nora said. "Then I will be there." The Superior Court hearing was moved to the County Assembly chamber because too many people wanted seats. Every Cedar Crown homeowner attended. Vanessa sat in the front row wearing a red blazer and holding her clipboard so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Conrad sat behind her beside a new attorney who looked young enough to be regretting several career choices at once. Sheriff Pike stood near the back wall. Camille sat by the aisle with her camera ready. Ellie stayed with my brother Dean. I wanted her protected from the ugliness, though part of me wondered whether children already understand more ugliness than adults admit. Nora began with my grandfather's deed, recorded in 1951, followed by the complete chain of title from Silas Hale, to my father, and then to me. She placed Victor Dane's development survey beside Amos Redd's independent survey on the projector. The eastern boundary appeared in two different locations, separated by 387 feet and 41 acres. A murmur moved across the room. Then Nora introduced an affidavit from Victor Dane himself. He had agreed to cooperate after investigators showed him the other altered surveys and the bank records tying him to Conrad. Victor admitted Conrad paid him $38,000 in cash to shift my boundary. He also admitted altering 6 other plats for Vail Residential Partners across northern Georgia. Conrad closed his eyes. Vanessa turned halfway around, staring at her husband as if this were the first time she had considered that arrogance and competence were not the same thing. Nora presented the forged deed next, including footage of Conrad personally delivering it to the county clerk and proof that the notary whose seal appeared on the document had been dead for 11 months. Then she introduced my deployment orders, the federal referral concerning actions taken against a service member's property during active duty. Mr. Jai Bale did not misunderstand the ownership, Moore said. He concealed it. He did not build on disputed land. He manufactured the dispute after construction began. Vanessa suddenly stood. That field was abandoned. Nobody was using it. The judge looked over his glasses. Mrs. Elv Vale, sit down. She remained standing. He was not even here. I do not remember deciding to speak, but I heard my own voice before Nora could stop me. I was not here because I was serving overseas. That is not abandonment. The room went silent. Vanessa sat down. The judge ruled that the 41 acres belonged to me, declared Victor Dane's plat fraudulent, and ordered the false boundary removed from county records. He referred the forged deed and survey scheme for criminal prosecution. Before the hearing adjourned, Sheriff Pike walked down the center aisle and stopped beside Conrad. The handcuffs clicked twice, sharp and clean, and for 1 second nobody moved. Vanessa whispered, "This cannot be happening." Harold Finch answered from 2 rows behind her, "It already happened. You just thought it was happening to somebody else." Conrad was indicted for fraud, bribery, forgery, and conspiracy, while federal investigators opened a separate case involving my deployment and the property scheme. Vanessa was charged with filing a false police report and resigned from the HOA before the board could remove her. Harold became the new president. His first vote canceled every fine issued against me. His second authorized demolition of the wall. Ellie stood beside me when the first section fell. Concrete blocks crashed into the red clay. Dust rolled across the yard, and Boone ran through the opening like Freedom had personally called his name. The 12 homeowners still faced the terrible reality. Their houses stood on land they did not own. I could have demanded removal. I could have charged whatever the market allowed. Instead, Nora and I created long-term ground leases at rates the families could manage, with protections preventing another developer from exploiting them. All 12 signed. The income restored the creek, replanted the eastern meadow, and created the Rachel Hale Homecoming Fund to help veterans and surviving military families buy homes. Some people told me I was too generous. Others said collecting rent from innocent homeowners was unfair, even though I had spared them from losing everything. I still do not know whether there was a perfect answer. Justice rarely arrives clean. Sometimes it comes covered in dust, carrying legal papers in one hand and mercy in the other. So tell me what you would have done. Would you have let those 12 families stay? Or would you have forced every house off land stolen while you were serving overseas? Leave your answer in the comments. Share the story with someone who thinks that clipboard creates authority. And subscribe, because the next developer made the same mistake with a retired Marine who knew exactly how to bring an entire mountainside project crashing down.